And Mongolia is also important for strategic reasons because Russia also fears. Let me tell you that uh, growing influence of China on Mongolia is not a good thing for Russia, and that's the reason why. That's the reason why Russia is also promoting investment from other countries like India and some neutral countries. So we have to understand the broader geopolitics also when.
Professor Rajan, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to Strat News Global and Global Compass.
Thank you for inviting me here.
In the larger scheme of things, when it comes to strategic affairs, international affairs, Mongolia is not something that figures in conversations much, except, of course, academics like yourself. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the country Mongolia itself. Now, I was doing some reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I read was till 1911, it was a part of China till the fall of the Qing dynasty, after which it declared independence. And in the 1930s, when Japan attacked Mongolia, Russia came to its rescue. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the recognition of Mongolia came in much later when the World War II. I think around 1945 was the year that the Soviet Union recognized Mongolia. But before that, already Soviet Union was supporting Mongolia as a kind of independent autonomous unit. But the confusion was regarding whether Mongolia should be granted a kind of independent state status or not. So the recognition was an issue partly because China was making claims, and initially Russia, I mean Soviet Union of that period.
Soviet.
Yeah, Soviet Union had a good relation with China, so a lot of politics was being played out, and Soviet Union, despite supporting Mongolia, didn't recognize Mongolia as a state for a very long time, and it came only in 1945 after the World War II. You're right that after the Japanese invasion, and when China and Russia both realized that there can be a third country which might try to occupy Mongolia, so they had to recognize the status, and also partly because the politics in China was very different, and now this communist rule was emerging in China. So Mongolia also recognized China, which earlier it didn't do. But if you see the history and the politics of Mongolia, I mean the geography of Mongolia, so Mongolia is a state which is very landlocked. It's kind of located in between the two countries. One is on the southern side is China, and on the northern side you have Russia. And it's landlocked, so it's always looking for some access, because if it wants to export to any other country, it has to depend upon this the either China or Russia. Population wise, it's multi-ethnic. Buddhism has been a dominant, Tibetan Buddhism, what you call it. So
Yeah.
ethnically they are the dominant. So it's
Right.
very interesting country in the sense that even today, located in between China and Russia, this country is a kind of democracy, which is not expected, in a space which is Eurasian space. But yes, because of the history and a lot of other things, the way it has emerged.
Hmm.
Yeah, we can come to that. Yeah.
So, Mongolia historically has maintained a neutral stance when it comes to international politics. And of course, like you yourself said, very strategically placed, both close proximity, sharing borders with both Russia and China. So now, how does this, would Mongolia's position evolve given this visit, given Putin's visit to Mongolia?
Yeah, this is very interesting, but let me clarify that initially Mongolia was not a neutral state, in the sense that when you talk of the history, and I'm talking the Cold War period, 1940, roughly from 1950, when the Cold War started emerging. So
Yeah.
after that period, Mongolia was supported by the Soviet Union. So it was very pro-Soviet Union compared to China, because as you know that in 1950s and 1960s, Sino-Soviet split became very prominent, and China didn't have very good relation with Soviet Union, and there was a kind of border war also between the two countries. So during that time, Mongolia was completely with Soviet Union. And Mongolia was also the part of Comecon, that was the economic organization that existed during the Cold War period. But what happened after 1991, after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, so that is very interesting, because after that, Mongolia adopted a different kind of policy. Mongolia knew that is located between China and Russia. So it had to, it also tried to diversify its policy, and the term which is used by Mongolian scholars and diplomats, etc., they call it multi-pillar policy. So they are saying that they would have to have good relation with China and Russia, and Mongolia does not have a choice. And also tell you, Mongolia's population is a very small population, 3.5, 3.67 million, or maybe 3.9 million. So just less than 4 million population. So Mongolia, and it's a huge territory in terms of 19th or 20th largest territory in the world. So Mongolia has to have a policy which is which is supported by China, which is supported by Russia, but also it tried to engage in the 1990s with other countries, especially United States, but also European country, and later India, Japan also. India, Japan, South Korea. So these were the countries with which Mongolia tried to establish relationship, and
Mhm.
into the extent that and I think the year I don't remember, but it signed a strategic partnership agreement with Germany, and that is something that you can understand that is not liked by either China or by Russia, and
Yeah.
that was signed much later, after 1914. And after 1914, the relationship between Russia and the European Union, etc., went very bad. But even after that, Mongolia signed a treaty, and French President Macron visited, German the high dignitary visited, the Foreign Secretary Cameron, British Secretary, he visited, and Mongolia also started having good relation with United States. And in that
Mhm.
process, it also came very close to India, and India has signed very important agreement, and we can talk it about later. But
Yeah.
also Japan,
Yeah.
Korea. So after 1990s, Mongolia started following a very diverse kind of foreign policy, and the term being used is very interesting. It's called third neighbor policy, because Mongolia is surrounded by only two countries, so it's always looking for a third country which can balance the relationship between the two countries. What has happened
Mm.
recently, because Russia and China, they have come very closer in terms of strategic partnership, in terms of political
Yes.
and ideological partnership. So Mongolia is very scared that Mongolia now will not have the choice of having relationship with a number of other countries in the West, or the countries which support
in
the
light
West.
of in light of the Ukraine war, in light of the ICC ruling against Vladimir Putin, right? Because
Yes,
the countries were exhorting Mongolia to arrest Putin, but then that it didn't do it. Laid out a red carpet welcome for him, but
that's very That's very interesting. Just give me 30 seconds to answer that.
sure,
See,
sure, sure.
ICC, the ruling that came, against Putin after the war that started in Ukraine. But let me tell you that ICC is a defunct body. It's not a very effective body as far as when it comes to dealing with the powerful countries. In the last
Right.
2 decades, the ICC has not arrested any important dignitary. Forget about the president. Even the important high dignitaries, they have not arrested anyone. And also, please remember that United States is not a member, is not a this. It has not ratified this agreement, ICC.
Right.
This, and so China, Russia, all the important major countries, they don't agree to ICC. So ICC is more like symbolic. The West tries to create the issue of human rights, etc., but it's not a very effective body. So it does not impact Putin that way. That's what I was saying.
Let's talk about Russia now. Where does Mongolia fit into Russia's larger strategy?
Mongolia is extremely important for Russia, because Russia at the moment is looking for a diversification of its partnership. Russian economy, to a large extent, before 2014 Crimea, that invasion, before that, Russia was completely Russian economy was very closely having ties with the Western countries, the gas supply, the oil supply, etc., to European countries. But after that, the strain that emerged, the sanctions which followed, and especially after the Russia-Ukraine war, this Russia has been completely isolated. But Russia has not been isolated by the countries of the global South. The Western sanction and the Western policy, the policy of freezing the Russian reserves, dollar, etc. So after that, Russia started looking for the partners in the East very strongly. And in that, Mongolia is important, because Mongolia is located in between Russia and China. So Russia also has independent territory which can connect to China, but with Mongolia, they have very important agreement. And Russia also realizes that because now it will not be having very close economic cooperation with the Western countries, so it has to pivot towards the east. And if you're talking of the east, there are few countries which are very important from Russian perspective. One is China, second one is of course Japan, whether Russia likes it or not, Korea to some extent,
Hmm.
Indonesia, Vietnam in the Southeast Asia, and India in the what you call Indo-Pacific, or India in the Indian Ocean in the South Asia. So these are the countries which are extremely important for Russia when it looks at the policy, which it calls Asia Pacific. Russia, to even today, it does not call Indo-Pacific. According to Russia, that's an American term. So according to Russia's policy of Asia Pacific, Mongolia figures prominently because they're planning this railroad and what you call this Power of Siberia pipeline too. And Power of Siberia pipeline is the gas pipeline, which is expected to be inaugurated in 2024. But also this Russia is it will take a few years to have the full capacity, etc. It's a 2,600 kilometer pipeline, a very important pipeline from Russian perspective, because earlier Russia used to supply gas only to European countries, and the fact that now Russia decided to supply gas to China, so that's an important decision from the Russian perspective. But
Hmm.
the problem that Russia is facing, that Russia does not have too much of money to invest. So Russia is also looking for investment from China, also from other countries. Many of other countries which could have invested, for instance, say for instance India will not invest in any project there because India fears secondary sanction by the Western countries. So only investment that can come is from China, because China is the beneficiary, and approximately 14 to 15 billion dollar investment is required in that. But China is also now scared because China thinks that if it has too much of dependence on Russia, probably it will come under some kind of secondary sanctions by the West. So that is an issue. But yes, Mongolia is very important, and Mongolia traditionally has been very close to Soviet Union and Russia, as I told you. And
Yeah.
Mongolia is also important for strategic reasons because Russia also fears. Let me tell you that uh, growing influence of China on Mongolia is not a good thing for Russia, and that's the reason
Hmm.
why. That's the reason why Russia is also promoting investment from other countries like India and some neutral countries. So we have to understand the broader geopolitics also. When
Yes, yes, exactly. That understanding is why we've invited you. Just clarify this for me or explain this to me. Does Mongolia figure in the scheme of things when it comes to the BRI, Belt and
Mongolia
Road
is part,
Initiative?
of course, Mongolia is part of BRI.
Hmm.
The neutrality and the multi-pillar policy of Mongolia, if you want
Hmm.
kind of evidence for that. So Mongolia has not joined till now Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Mongolia is part of BRI, and not only BRI, there is a trilateral agreement between Russia, Mongolia, and China. They have
Hmm.
economic, they call it Russia, Mongolia, China, or China, Mongolia, Russia corridor. And that corridor is a kind of, this a microcosmic, that's the kind of a small mirroring of what you call BRI, and also this part of BRI. But beyond that, this is very important for both China and Russia. But Mongolia tries to follow some kind of independent policy, and that's the reason Mongolia is an observer of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But Mongolia has not joined as a member. India is a member, Pakistan is a member,
Yeah.
Iran has
Yeah.
become a member, but Mongolia has not become the member, and that's very interesting. Despite so much of influence from these two countries, and Lavrov made a statement just I think last year that the most probable candidate for membership is Mongolia. And the reason why Putin is visiting Mongolia, and the last week why he visited, the two important reasons: he wants to expedite this what he call Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, and also he wants very strongly he wants to bring Mongolia into what you call Shanghai Cooperation Organization or Eurasian Economic Union framework. And it's not very happy that Mongolia is trying to have ties with Germany, France, and
Hmm.
United States. And yeah,
Naturally.
yeah.
Let's talk about the discovery of the rare metals, very, very critical rare metals that have been discovered in Mongolia, and how that could basically impact the regional geopolitics when it comes to Russia, China, and India. Let's move to India now. So, in 2022, September, Rajnath Singh visited Mongolia as well as Japan. Um, how do you think this discovery of rare metals will play out strategically now?
I think when you talk about the metals, the important things which traditionally important metals which have been exported from Mongolia to Russia to China and to other country, it's called coking coal. Not the cooking coal, coking coal. Manufacturing is used in manufacturing, so that
Yeah.
is important. But it also has tin, it has gold, it has copper, it has several other metals. That those metals are important also for India, and India signed kind of provided a soft loan of roughly $1 billion in the last few years, and that is
Hmm.
considered an important investment. And India understands that it's very important for India to have a very good relation with Mongolia, which partly has been India didn't take it seriously because earlier it was very close. It had very close ties with Soviet Union, Mongolia, but now India realizes that. Also, please remember that our cultural ties with Mongolia is very strong and are very strong, and we shouldn't ignore that factor. We should not overplay that factor, but at the same time, we should also take into account the Buddhist population, which again has linked with Tibet population, but again Buddhism has some kind of cultural connection with India. So, and with economic investment, I think India's investment is favored by Mongolia. India's investment is also liked and favored by Russia today, because Russia wants Mongolia to have diversified ties, and India is not a threat to Russia in any way, and it kind of strengthens the case of Russia in some way. And we are planning to. We are already importing coking coal from there, but we can also import as far as other minerals are concerned, be it tin, gold, copper, etc. And the route can be, because India is a very active participant in this East Economic Forum. Not this year, but earlier, Prime Minister Modi also visited the Eastern Economic Forum. So if the
Hmm.
trade route is established between, say, here from Mongolia to Vladivostok, and from Vladivostok we have established a shipping line which can come to this Chennai. So that route would be extremely important, and we are working on that. And we invested in a refinery, the 1 billion that I said. So that we invested in a refinery, and refinery is something which means which will strengthen the Mongolian economy, and with a population of only 3.89 million people. So it is a huge contribution by India, but India has to be very proactive. And also remember that in Mongolia is a democracy. It's not the best form of democracy, but it's still in Eurasian space. You do not have many countries which are democracy. So from
Right.
that perspective, it's very important for India.
So you're saying that even if Russia seeks to leverage Mongolia's natural resources, especially with the discovery of these rare metals, India has nothing to worry. India will still get access to these resources. That's
I
what you're
think
saying.
I think no. I think let me kind of clarify further that I think Russia's main concern would not be India. In fact, in terms of economic partnership, Mongolia's biggest partner today is China, not Russia, and
Hmm.
Mongolia also understands there are limitations as far as Russia is concerned, because Russia is this entire this focus of Russia today is with war, and it will take some time before Russia gets some kind of political and economic stability. So Mongolia would like Indian investment in that context, and Russia would also favor India's investment in Mongolia, because it supports a Russian narrative. It also supports kind of geopolitical balancing. Russia will not be worried, and India, of course, is not worried much about Russia, because India knows that that's Eurasian space, and Eurasian space dominated by Russia is not a threat to India, but the Eurasian space dominated by China is a concern for India. So from that perspective, India is very keen to have very strong ties with Mongolia. But China would not be very happy, I can tell you that.
Right. So I think we'll have to wait for the next few months to see how this entire thing will play out, because you see, the Western countries are not happy about this visit, especially in light of the ongoing Ukraine war. So, how Mongolia balances the two, I think, is something that we have to wait and watch. Is going to be very interesting over the next few months.
Absolutely, because the Western countries are certainly not happy, but Western
Hmm.
countries don't have choice. And also, let me tell you, Mongolia also does not have choice. If you have a population of less than 4 million people, and
Yes.
an economy of just few $1 billion, and surrounded by two big giants,
Yes.
China and nuclear powers, and third, on the other side, you have the powerful economy of Japan. So you do not have too many choices. And Mongolia will always be influenced by by China, by Russia. China economically, but otherwise politically, strategically, militarily. And China will also become important. As China's influence is growing, so China will become very important. So it's important for other countries like India, Japan, and the Western country also to have strong ties with Mongolia. Although
Hmm.
Russia will not favor Mongolia's strong ties with the Western countries, but Mongolia is pretty, like, it follows third, fourth neighbor policy, where it wants to have a strong ties with, and that compulsion of having good ties with China and Russia, we should not ignore that, because the way it's located, the kind of economy that it has. But at the
Naturally.
same time, at our level, at the cultural level, at economic level, and at political level, we should have very strong ties with Mongolia.
Right. So this visit was obviously Putin's visit was obviously Moscow's focus on strengthening its ties with Eurasia, and Mongolia was a part of that. And like you said, it has greater trade with China, and so I think these new geopolitical relationships and alliances is something that is going to play out over the next few months, and very interesting. Thank you very much, Professor Rajan, for taking out the time to talk to me, and I hope we have some clarity now, because like I said earlier, Mongolia is not really talked about a lot. And thank you so much for giving us that perspective. Thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.